History, as we know, it is a puzzle with pieces that refuse to fit. Archaeologists keep unearthing objects that defy our established timeline, suggesting ancient civilizations held knowledge that rivals our own. You are about to see 25 mysterious artifacts that challenge everything you were taught about humanity's past. By the end of this journey, you will possess evidence that could completely rewrite the story of human progress. We will examine a 2,000-year-old computer and a map that accurately depicts a continent buried under ice. What forgotten truths about our own potential are still waiting to be discovered? Our schoolbooks present a clear and steady march of human progress. It begins with simple stone tools, moves through the Bronze and Iron Ages, and culminates in our modern world of computers and spaceflight. This is the linear timeline of history we are all taught, a story of gradual, unbroken advancement. Yet this comforting narrative is built on a foundation that is beginning to crack. Mainstream archaeology, for all its careful work, struggles to explain the growing number of discoveries that simply do not fit within its established framework. These are the anomalies, often called out-of-place artifacts, or OOPArts for short. They are objects that appear far too advanced for the time period from which they are recovered, or are found in geological strata that predate humanity itself. Each one is a stark contradiction, a single piece of a different puzzle that suggests our timeline is wrong. What if human history is not a straight line, but a cycle of rises and catastrophic falls? The existence of these objects forces us to consider that our ancestors may have possessed knowledge and capabilities that we are only now, thousands of years later, beginning to comprehend all over again. As we peel back the layers of time, a far more mysterious and compelling picture of our past begins to emerge, one written not in words, but in stone, metal, and impossible engineering. The serene blue waters off the Greek island of Antikythera conceal a secret that shattered our understanding of ancient ingenuity. In the year 1900, sponge divers exploring a Roman-era shipwreck brought up a lump of corroded bronze and wood, initially dismissed as a piece of nautical debris. It was only decades later, when archaeologists carefully examined the object, that its true nature was revealed. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, a device of such stunning complexity that it has been called the world's first analog computer. Crafted over 2,000 years ago, it was an intricate clockwork of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, housed in a wooden case and operated by a hand crank. This was not a simple calendar. It was a sophisticated astronomical calculator designed to predict the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and even model the irregular orbit of the moon with a precision that accounted for its slight wobble. The mechanism displayed this information on dials on its front and back, a miniature bronze universe in the palm of your hand. The knowledge required to create such a device encompasses advanced mathematics, metallurgy, and a deep understanding of celestial mechanics. This level of mechanical engineering was not thought to exist until the complex geared clocks of the Renaissance, more than 1,000 years later. So how could the ancient Greeks, who we picture with chariots and triremes, possess the technical prowess to build a miniature planetarium? The Antikythera Mechanism stands as a silent, rusted rebuke to the linear timeline of progress. It is not a crude prototype. It is the refined product of a long-lost tradition of scientific instrument making, a tradition whose other works have simply turned to dust. This single artifact forces a profound question. If they could build this, what else did they know that history has forgotten? While the Greeks were mapping the heavens with bronze gears, another ancient culture may have been harnessing an invisible force we associate solely with the modern world. In the collections of the National Museum of Iraq sits a simple, unassuming clay jar, no larger than a man's hand. It was discovered in the 1930s near Baghdad, and it dates back to the Parthian period around 2,000 years ago. At first glance, it seems utterly ordinary, a common artifact from a bygone era, but its contents tell a different story entirely. Inside this jar, archaeologists found a carefully arranged assembly. A copper cylinder was soldered with a lead and tin alloy, and within this cylinder was suspended an iron rod. The jar itself showed signs of having been sealed with an asphalt plug, which would have insulated the entire apparatus. To the eyes of a modern scientist, this configuration is startlingly familiar. It bears an uncanny resemblance to a simple galvanic cell, a basic battery. The hypothesis is compelling. If the jar was filled with an acidic or alkaline liquid, like vinegar or grape juice, a chemical reaction would occur between the electrolyte solution and the two different metals. This reaction would generate a small but measurable electrical current, around 1 volt of electricity. Experiments with precise replicas of the so-called Baghdad Battery have confirmed that this is not just a theoretical possibility. The device actually works, so what was this ancient electricity used for? One leading theory suggests it could have been employed for electroplating, the process of depositing a thin layer of one metal onto another. Artisans could have used the current to gild silver objects with a fine layer of gold, a practice known from the region. Another, more speculative idea proposes its use in religious or medicinal ceremonies, where the gentle, mysterious tingling of the current could have been interpreted as a divine sensation. The implications are profound. This single, humble jar suggests that the understanding of electrical principles is not a modern invention, but a lost discovery. It forces us to ask what other applications for this invisible power might have been explored in antiquity, only to be forgotten for centuries. Was this a one-off experiment, or the surviving evidence of a wider, forgotten field of ancient electrical knowledge? The same era that produced the Baghdad Battery also left behind a book that has become the ultimate locked room mystery of the ancient world. Tucked away in a vault at Yale University is the Voynich Manuscript, a 240-page codex that is utterly alien. Carbon dating confirms it was created in the early 15th century, yet every single word is written in a script that has no known counterpart in human history. The text flows in a neat, cursive hand, its characters completely unfamiliar, and the words are only half the mystery. The pages are filled with lavish, bewildering illustrations. There are drawings of plants that do not grow anywhere on Earth, with twisted roots and leaves that belong to no known species. Other sections depict strange, biological diagrams of tiny, naked women bathing in interconnected, green-tinted pools. And still others show complex astronomical charts featuring unknown constellations and celestial spheres. For over a century, the world's top cryptographers, linguists, and mathematicians have tried to crack its code, from intelligence agencies after the Second World War to modern supercomputers. They have all failed. The patterns within the text suggest it is a real language with its own consistent grammar and syntax, not a random forgery. This means it almost certainly contains meaningful information, a complete system of knowledge sealed away behind an indecipherable wall. What could its author have been trying so desperately to preserve? The most compelling theory is that the manuscript represents a lost tradition of knowledge, perhaps concerning herbal medicine or astronomy, so advanced or so different that its context has vanished from our historical record. The book is a silent, beautiful, and profoundly frustrating testament. It sits there, a complete library of secrets, holding answers we can no longer even formulate as questions. The silent, indecipherable pages of the Voynich Manuscript suggest a world of lost knowledge, but a different kind of map offers a geographical clue that is just as baffling. In the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul rests a world map drawn on gazelle skin by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis in 1513. At first glance, it is a beautiful artifact of the age of exploration, depicting the known coasts of Europe, Africa, and the newly discovered Americas. But a closer look at the southernmost edge of the map reveals something that should not be there. It shows a landmass connected to South America, a continent we now call Antarctica. The problem is not that it is there, but how it is depicted. The map presents the coastline of Queen Maud Land in Antarctica with remarkable detail, but it shows this coastline free of its immense ice sheet, a sheet that has covered the continent for at least 6,000 years. Modern seismic surveys using ice-penetrating radar have only recently been able to map the true topography of Antarctica beneath the ice. When these modern subsurface surveys are compared to the Piri Reis Map, the correspondence is startling. The ancient map appears to show the actual, ice-free coastline, along with mountain ranges and river estuaries that have been invisible to the human eye for millennia. Admiral Reis himself wrote notes on the map, stating that he was not the original discoverer. He claimed to have compiled his work from 20 different source charts, some of which he said dated back to the Library of Alexandria from the time of Alexander the Great. This admission is the key to the mystery. It suggests that Reis was working from far older maps, drawn by a civilization with seafaring and cartographic abilities that rival our own. Who were these ancient mariners who could sail to and accurately chart a continent that would not be officially discovered for another 300 years? This single piece of parchment implies the existence of a prehistoric global exploration, a forgotten chapter where someone mapped the entire world with a precision that would not be matched again until the 20th century. Deep within the sweltering jungles of Costa Rica, a different kind of mystery lies half buried in the earth. The Diquis Delta is home to hundreds of massive stone spheres, some as small as a basketball, others towering taller than a man and weighing over 16 tons. They are carved from a single hard block of granite, a material incredibly difficult to shape, yet their surfaces are unnervingly smooth, their shapes exhibiting a geometric perfection that seems to defy their ancient origins. The indigenous peoples who crafted them centuries before Spanish contact left behind no written records explaining their purpose. The stones themselves are the only message, and they are silent. Just imagine the immense challenge of their creation. Without metal tools, artisans would have had to painstakingly shape these colossal orbs using smaller stones, heat, and water, achieving a symmetry so precise that modern surveys struggle to find any significant flaws. Then came the even greater task of moving them. How does a civilization without wheels or draft animals transport a solid granite sphere weighing several tons through dense, mountainous jungle? The logistics alone suggest a highly organized society with sophisticated engineering knowledge, capable of planning routes and mobilizing a large workforce. Were these spheres arranged to mirror constellations, acting as giant astronomical calendars? Could their placements have marked territorial boundaries or sacred sites, representing a cosmic harmony between earth and sky? The truth is, we still do not know. Their perfect forms stand as a monument to a lost understanding of stone and space, a knowledge so complete it could shape the very earth into spheres, yet so fragile it could be swallowed whole by the waiting jungle. A small wooden object no larger than a hand was discovered in a dark corner of a tomb at Saqqara, Egypt. dated to around 200 years before the Common Era. It was catalogued simply as a bird figurine. But this was a bird unlike any other found in nature. While its body has the general shape of a bird, its most striking feature is a tail fin that stands perfectly vertical and rectangular, a design you would expect to see on the horizontal stabilizer of a modern airplane. Birds simply do not have vertical tail fins. Their tails are flat and horizontal, used for steering and balance. This artifact, now known as the Saqqara Bird, possesses the exact aerodynamic profile of a monoplane glider. The implications of this simple piece of carved wood are staggering. Aeronautical engineers have constructed scale models of the Saqqara Bird, testing its flight capabilities. When launched with a little thrust, the models do not tumble or fall. They soar. The design generates lift efficiently, and that distinctive vertical tail provides remarkable stability in the air, preventing it from rolling side to side. It is, by all aerodynamic measures, a functional glider. So was this just a child's toy, a lucky guess by an ancient artisan, or is it something far more profound? Could the Saqqara Bird be a scale model of a much larger, working aircraft? The knowledge required to design such a stable glider is not intuitive. It requires a deep, practical understanding of air pressure, lift, and stability. This small artifact opens a breathtaking window into a possibility we rarely consider. It suggests that the ancient Egyptians, or a culture that influenced them, may have been experimenting with the principles of flight over 2,000 years ago. Perhaps a brilliant mind observed the flight of birds and seeds and sought to replicate it, building and testing prototypes that have long since turned to dust. The Saqqara Bird stands as a silent, wooden question. Was it merely a ritual object, or is it the sole surviving blueprint from humanity's first attempt to conquer the skies? The seamless curves of the Saqqara Bird suggest an early grasp of aerodynamics, but another discovery implies a technology so advanced it defies any known history. In the winter of 1961, 3 men were prospecting for geodes near the town of Olancha, California. They cracked open what seemed to be a perfectly ordinary stone nodule, expecting to find the beautiful crystalline cavity typical of a geode. Instead, they found an object that should not have been there. At the geode's core was a circular cross-section of a hard, metallic cylinder, with what appeared to be a porcelain or ceramic sleeve surrounding a central magnetic rod. To any modern eye, the object looked exactly like a spark plug from a 20th century internal combustion engine. The immediate and obvious conclusion was that it was a piece of modern junk, somehow encased in the rock. Yet the geology itself presented an impossible contradiction. The hard outer layer of the nodule was not just any rock. It was a concretion of hardened clay, pebbles, and fossil shells, a matrix that geologists who examined it stated would have taken an immense amount of time to form, potentially 500,000 years. How could a 20th century spark plug find itself sealed inside a rock that predates modern humanity itself? Skeptics were quick to propose an answer. They identified the object as a champion spark plug model from the 1920s, suggesting the geode formed around it with surprising speed in a local, mineral-rich environment. This explanation, however, fails to fully satisfy. The prospectors were experienced rockhounds familiar with the region's geology, and they insisted the concretion was ancient. Furthermore, the exact composition of the object has been disputed, with some analyses suggesting its materials do not perfectly match any known spark plug. The Coso Artifact, as it became known, sits at the heart of a perfect storm of controversy. If it is just a spark plug, then its story is a lesson in how quickly nature can fossilize modern objects. But if it is not, if it is genuinely an ancient manufactured object, then its implications are staggering. It would mean that a technology indistinguishable from our own existed on Earth in a time when, according to every established model, our ancestors were barely beginning to use simple stone tools. This single, strange object challenges the most fundamental assumptions of archaeology. It forces us to confront a possibility even more radical than lost civilizations. Could it be evidence of a cycle of technological rise and fall so complete that all traces, save for a few indestructible fragments, have vanished from the Earth? A similar mystery was unearthed from the stone of a different London. In 1936, on a rocky outcrop near London, Texas, a couple made a startling discovery. As they were walking along a creek bed, they noticed a piece of rock with what looked like a piece of wood protruding from it. When they cracked the rock open, they found a hammer completely encased within the stone. This was not just any hammer. It had a well-formed wooden handle and a solid iron head, a tool that looked like something from the 19th century. The problem was the rock itself. Geologists identified the concretion as a Cretaceous rock formation, a layer of stone that dates back over 100 million years, a time when dinosaurs ruled the Earth and humans would not appear for another 99 million years. The wooden handle had even begun the process of turning to coal, a transformation that requires immense geological time. The hammer's head presented its own puzzle. Metallurgical analysis revealed it was made of an unusually pure form of iron, with a distinct chemical structure and a lack of the impurities, like sulfur or silicon, that are commonplace in modern industrial iron production. This was not a crude lump of metal. It was a well-forged tool, and despite its alleged age, it showed remarkably little corrosion. Skeptics have offered a counter-explanation. They suggest the hammer was a miner's tool from the 1800s that was simply dropped and, through a peculiar chemical process, became rapidly encased in a concretion of dissolved minerals. This can happen, forming a hard, rock-like shell around an object in a matter of decades. Yet for many, this explanation does not fully resolve the anomaly. The type of rock and the beginning stages of coalification in the wood seem to point toward a much older origin. The London hammer is a heavy, tangible object you can hold in your hand. It is not a vague legend or a blurred photograph. Its very existence forces an impossible choice. Either our understanding of geology and the timeline of life on this planet is fundamentally flawed, or a tool-making intelligence was present on Earth in an age we have always believed was populated only by prehistoric beasts. It stands as a silent, ironclad question, hammering against the foundations of everything we think we know about time. Far to the east, another story emerges from a mountain cave, one that pushes the boundaries of ancient mysteries into the realm of interstellar contact. In 1938, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-te was exploring the remote Bayon Kararula Mountains near the border of Tibet. According to the account, he and his team entered a system of caves and made a bizarre discovery. The caves contained neat rows of graves, and within them were the skeletons of small, fragile beings with unusually large, elongated skulls. Scattered throughout the burial site were hundreds of stone discs, each about 9 inches in diameter with a perfectly round hole in the center. At first glance, they looked like simple stone wheels, but a closer inspection revealed something far more strange. Each disc had a continuous, spiral groove that ran from the center hole all the way to its outer edge. And etched into the walls of that tiny groove was a line of minuscule hieroglyphics, a script so small it was almost invisible to the naked eye. The story takes an even more incredible turn. A professor in Beijing allegedly managed to translate the script decades later. The translation told a startling narrative. It described a group of beings called the Dropa, whose spacecraft had crash-landed in the mountains 12,000 years ago. Unable to repair their ship, the survivors took refuge in the caves, eventually intermingling with the local tribes and leaving behind their story carved in stone. If this account were true, the Dropa Stones would be the single most explosive artifact ever discovered, rewriting not only human history but our place in the cosmos. Mainstream archaeology, however, dismisses the entire story as an elaborate hoax. No reputable institution has ever been able to study the original discs, and they have seemingly vanished. The skeletons were explained away as the remains of now extinct apes. The entire narrative is built on a foundation of second-hand accounts and sensationalist magazine articles from the 1960s. So where does that leave us? The tale of the Dropa Stones exists in a strange limbo. It is either a profound truth ignored by a skeptical establishment, or one of history's most enduring and compelling modern myths. The story persists because it touches on a deep human question. In the vastness of time, could our planet have been visited? And if so, is it possible that the only evidence lies hidden in a lost cave, waiting to be found again? The story of the Dropa Stones dissolves into myth, but a different set of carved stones from South America presents a mystery that is both more tangible and more visually jarring. In the 1960s, a Peruvian farmer began selling thousands of these artifacts to tourists. They became known as the Ica Stones, and their carvings depict scenes that should not exist. On the dark, polished surfaces of these andesite rocks, human figures are shown living alongside creatures we instantly recognize as dinosaurs. Some show men battling a triceratops, while others depict what look like stegosaurs being used as beasts of burden. But the strangeness does not end there. Other stones illustrate complex medical procedures that seem impossibly advanced for any ancient culture. One famous example shows a figure performing what can only be interpreted as a heart transplant, with a detailed rendering of the connected arteries and veins. Another stone appears to show a cesarean section, with the mother holding a tool to her mouth, perhaps as a form of ancient anesthesia. There are even carvings of humans using telescopes to observe comets and star systems, suggesting a sophisticated grasp of astronomy. The immediate and most logical explanation is that these are all modern fakes, carved by the farmer and his associates to profit from the tourist trade. Indeed, the farmer himself eventually admitted to carving many of them, yet this admission did not close the case for everyone. Proponents of their authenticity point to a smaller group of stones that were allegedly found in a sealed pre-Columbian tomb, their surfaces covered in a natural patina that could indicate great age. They argue that while thousands were forged, a core collection of genuine stones might exist, pointing to an ancient culture with inexplicable knowledge. Whether these particular stones are hoaxes or history is almost beside the point. Their true power lies in the conversation they force us to have. They challenge us to ask what ancient people truly knew about their own deep past. Could these carvings be a distorted memory of a time when humans and megafauna coexisted, passed down through generations and eventually etched in stone? Or are they a record of a lost science, a forgotten understanding of medicine and the cosmos so complete it rivals our own? The Ica Stones, real or not, hold up a mirror to our assumptions. They represent humanity's enduring desire to record its understanding of the world, blending observed reality with the frontiers of imagination, leaving behind a puzzle we are still trying to solve. While the Ica Stones present a gallery of impossible images, another Peruvian desert holds a mystery written on such a grand scale that it can only be comprehended from the heavens. The Nazca Plains are a vast, arid canvas where the ground itself has been etched with hundreds of enormous geoglyphs. These are not small carvings. They are colossal designs of spiders, hummingbirds, monkeys, and spirals, some stretching over 1,200 feet long, their lines running perfectly straight for miles across the desert floor. The Nazca culture created them between 500 years before the Common Era and 500 years after, simply by removing the dark, sun-baked top layer of pebbles to reveal the lighter-colored sand beneath. This technique ensured their preservation for centuries, but it raises a profound question. Why would a people invest such immense effort to create intricate artworks they could never hope to see in their entirety? From ground level, the lines appear as little more than shallow grooves and ruts in the earth. The full, breathtaking form of a giant condor or a twisting killer whale only becomes clear from a vantage point high in the air, a perspective the Nazca people could never have physically achieved. This simple fact has fueled endless speculation. Were these giant pathways ritual processions where walking the lines connected the people to their gods? Do the shapes align with constellations, forming a giant astronomical calendar etched into the planet? Or could they have been messages not for humans but for something else entirely? The precision involved is itself a marvel of lost knowledge. To create a perfectly straight line that runs for miles over uneven terrain requires sophisticated surveying techniques. How did they maintain such flawless proportions and alignment without the aid of modern tools or even a hot air balloon to check their work? Some researchers suggest they could have used a series of stakes and ropes, scaling up small models with an ingenious system of grids. Yet the sheer scale and perfection of the largest figures suggest a level of planning and geometric understanding that seems to rival our own. The Nazca Lines are a testament to a different kind of knowledge, one that saw the world not just from a human perspective, but from a cosmic one. They represent a civilization so connected to the sky that they painted their beliefs onto the very skin of the earth, creating a message for the ages that we are still struggling to read. The silent, sprawling Nazca Lines are a mystery of perspective, but one ancient monument towers above all others as the ultimate enigma of lost knowledge. The Great Pyramid of Giza is so familiar that its true, staggering impossibility is often overlooked. This is not merely a pile of stones, it is a mountain of precision engineering. Its four sides are aligned to the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, with an error of less than 1/15 of a single degree. Such accuracy would be a remarkable feat for modern surveyors with satellite technology, yet this was accomplished over 4,500 years ago. The pyramid's base is a near-perfect square with sides that vary in length by less than 2 inches. This geometric perfection is not random. It appears to be woven into the very fabric of its design. The ratio of the pyramid's perimeter to its height is remarkably close to 2 times pi, the fundamental mathematical constant that defines the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter. How could the builders have encoded this sophisticated mathematical concept into stone centuries before pi was formally calculated by Greek mathematicians? The physical construction defies belief. It is composed of approximately 2,300,000 limestone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons. Some of the granite blocks used in the internal chambers weigh up to 80 tons. Quarrying, transporting, and lifting these colossal stones into place with such perfect joints that a razor blade cannot fit between them is a logistical nightmare that modern engineers still struggle to explain. The mainstream theory of ramps and thousands of workers is constantly challenged by the sheer scale and precision of the work. This has led to compelling, if controversial, alternative ideas. Could the builders have used a now-forgotten technology to soften stone, making it malleable like clay? Some point to stone vessels from earlier dynasties that appear to have been lathed with a precision that seems to require advanced machinery. Others propose they had mastered acoustic levitation, using specific sound frequencies to neutralize the immense weight of the blocks and move them effortlessly into position. The mysteries continue within the pyramid's core. The so-called air shafts leading from the king's chamber are not for ventilation. They are precisely angled tunnels that aligned with specific stars in the night sky over 4 millennia ago. One shaft pointed directly to the pole star Alpha Draconis, while another targeted the constellation of Orion, which was associated with the god Osiris. This was more than a tomb for a pharaoh. It was a celestial observatory and a terrestrial representation of the heavens. The Great Pyramid stands as a silent, granite argument against the gradual progression of history. It suggests that its creators possessed a unified knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, geology, and engineering, so profound that we have yet to fully comprehend the methods behind their work. It is a monument that does not ask us how it was built, but why we have forgotten how to build anything like it. The same perfection we see in stone is echoed in a substance far more fragile and luminous. Deep within the vaults of private collections and museums, a handful of life-sized crystal skulls stare out with empty eyes. The most famous of these is the Mitchell-Hedges skull, a masterpiece carved from a single, flawless block of clear quartz crystal. Its anatomy is unnervingly accurate, with a detachable jawbone that fits perfectly into the cranium. The level of craftsmanship is so advanced that experts argue it would be incredibly difficult to replicate today, even with our diamond-tipped tools and computer-guided lasers. Quartz crystal is an incredibly hard and brittle material. To carve something so complex from a single block without it shattering would require not only immense skill but also a technology for grinding and polishing that seems to defy the era from which it supposedly came. For a long time, these skulls were romanticized as relics of ancient Mesoamerican cultures, perhaps the Aztec or Maya, objects of power for high priests. Legends grew around them, suggesting they were repositories of esoteric knowledge used for healing, for seeing the future, or for communicating with other realms. The mystery, however, began to crack under modern scrutiny. Scientific analysis has since debunked the majority of these skulls, revealing telltale marks of 19th-century European wheeled engraving tools. They were likely clever fakes created to feed the era's fascination with the exotic. Yet, a shadow of doubt remains for a few, including the Mitchell-Hedges skull, whose origin story is clouded and whose manufacturing techniques some researchers still find anomalous. Whether ancient artifacts or brilliant hoaxes, their enduring power is undeniable. They tap into a profound question about the past. Did ancient civilizations possess a lost technology for working with light and crystal, a method so refined it has vanished without a trace? Or do the skulls simply reflect our own deep-seated desire to find a physical key to forgotten wisdom, a crystal-clear window into a past that remains stubbornly out of focus? A single Norse coin, no larger than a thumbnail, was unearthed from the mud of a Native American shell midden in Maine. This was the Maine Penny, and its discovery sent ripples through the world of archaeology. Carbon dating of the site places it firmly around the 11th century, a time when Viking longships were exploring the fringes of the North Atlantic. The coin itself, a silver penny, was minted in Norway between 1065 and 1080, a relic from the world of Leif Erikson. What makes this tiny artifact so monumental is its context. It was not found in a Viking settlement like Elance Ox Meadows in Newfoundland, but deep within a prehistoric site belonging to the Penobscot people, hundreds of miles to the south. This was not a piece lost from a collector's pocket. It was an object that had been there among indigenous North Americans for nearly 1,000 years. Its presence tells a story that official history missed. it is tangible proof that transoceanic contact occurred long before Columbus's voyage in 1492. This coin challenges the comfortable narrative of an old world and a new world developing in complete isolation. It suggests that the Viking exploration of North America was not just a fleeting, failed colony in the far north, but part of a wider network of travel and trade that may have extended far down the eastern seaboard. How did this coin travel so far south? Was it passed from hand to hand through indigenous trade routes that stretched from the frozen coasts of Canada down into the forests of New England? Did a Viking ship, perhaps blown off course, make contact with native peoples in the Gulf of Maine? The Maine Penny forces us to confront a more interconnected ancient world. It implies that maritime knowledge and global connections were more extensive than our history books have ever acknowledged. If a single, durable coin can survive to tell this tale, how many other, more perishable proofs of contact have simply rotted away? How many stories of encounters between different worlds have been lost to time, leaving behind only this one small silver clue? Buried alongside the bones of a long-extinct mastodon, a strange metal wedge tells a story that geology and history refuse to reconcile. In 1974, construction workers on the banks of the Mureș River in Aiud, Romania, unearthed 3 objects about 35 feet deep in a sand trench. 2 of them were fossilized mastodon bones, relics from a creature that vanished over 10,000 years ago. The 3rd object was this, a wedge-shaped piece of metal, heavily corroded and covered in a thick layer of sandstone. Initially dismissed as a tool, it was put in storage and largely forgotten for a decade. When it was finally analyzed, the results sent shockwaves through the small community of researchers who saw them. The wedge was not made of iron or bronze. It was composed of an alloy, primarily aluminum, encased in a 1 millimeter thick layer of aluminum oxide. This is the point where the story becomes truly baffling. Aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, but it is never found in its pure, metallic form in nature. It is always locked away in compounds like bauxite ore. To produce usable aluminum requires a complex industrial process of electrolysis, one that was not invented until the 1880s. The official history of aluminum begins with its isolation in 1825, and it remained a precious, exotic metal, more valuable than gold, until the modern smelting process was developed. So how did a manufactured aluminum alloy end up buried in a layer of earth alongside the remains of an Ice Age giant? Skeptics have a ready answer. They propose the object is simply a piece of a modern excavator bucket or a dental drill bit from a mining operation, which somehow became encased in a quick-forming concretion. Yet this explanation struggles with a few stubborn facts. The wedge was found deep beneath 2 separate strata of loess, a wind-blown sediment that takes millennia to accumulate. More telling is the alloy itself. The analysis showed it contained 11 other elements, a specific blend not commonly used in modern industrial aluminum. Furthermore, the pattern of wear and the distinct shape with 2 perfectly drilled holes do not match any known contemporary tool. If it is just a piece of modern machinery, it is a piece of machinery that does not seem to exist. The Aiud Wedge presents us with a paradox wrapped in an enigma. It sits at a crossroads, a piece of advanced metallurgy found in a context that predates human civilization as we know it. Could it be evidence of a lost, sophisticated culture capable of processes we believe we invented? Or does it point to a far stranger possibility that our timeline of technological progress is not just incomplete but fundamentally misunderstood? This single, unassuming wedge of metal carries the weight of an entire forgotten age, waiting for us to decipher its true origin. The silent, manufactured perfection of the Aiud Wedge speaks of lost industrial processes, but on a remote island in the vast Pacific, a different kind of mystery stands in plain sight. Easter Island is dotted with nearly 900 massive stone figures, the Moai, their stern, elongated faces gazing inland across the grassy slopes. These are not small carvings. The average Moai stands over 13 feet tall and weighs a staggering 14 tons. The largest, named Paro, is a colossal 69 feet long and weighs an estimated 82 tons, a megalithic giant that was never fully erected. The quarry at Rono Raraku, a volcanic crater, is a haunting landscape of half-finished giants, their bodies still fused to the living rock, as if the workers simply walked away one day. The Rapa Nui people, with a population that likely never exceeded 15,000 and with no metal tools or wheels, accomplished this feat. Using nothing harder than basalt stone picks, they carved these monoliths directly from the volcanic tuff, a backbreaking process that would have consumed immense time and labor for just a single statue. But the greater mystery is not how they were carved, but how they were moved. The completed Moai were transported miles across the island's rugged terrain to massive stone platforms called ahu along the coast. How do you walk an 80-ton stone statue across a landscape of hills and valleys? For decades, the leading theory involved log rollers and large teams of people pulling with ropes. But recent experiments have proposed a surprisingly simple and effective alternative, a method that makes the statues appear to walk. By attaching 3 ropes to the megalith, one on each side to rock it and one at the back to control the descent, small teams can make the statue pivot from side to side, edging it forward in a slow, stuttering gait. This walking method, while plausible, still does not fully capture the immense logistical challenge. The coordination, the food and water for the workers, the precise route planning to navigate the island's topography, all speak to a highly organized society with a profound and unified purpose. The creation of the Moai was far more than an engineering project. It was the ultimate expression of a spiritual and social order. Each statue represented a deified ancestor, a conduit of supernatural power or mana for the living community. The effort required to honor these ancestors bound the society together, channeling their collective knowledge and will into the impossible task of making stone walk. This deep understanding of social organization, engineering, and their spiritual connection to the land represents a pinnacle of human achievement. Yet when European contact came in the 18th century, this knowledge was already fading, the society collapsing. The sophisticated skills required to carve and transport the Moai were lost, leaving only the silent, stoic giants as a testament to a forgotten zenith of human capability. They stand as a powerful reminder that knowledge, no matter how advanced, is not a permanent possession, but a flame that can be extinguished, leaving behind only enigmatic monuments to question our own assumptions of progress. Carved into the stone walls of a dark crypt within the Hathor Temple at Dendera, Egypt, is a relief that seems to depict a technology lost to time. The scene shows 2 figures standing beside a large, translucent bulb, inside of which a snake stretches its body along the length of the object, its head touching the tip of a slender pole held by one of the figures. The entire assembly is supported by a pillar, and a cable-like cord appears to connect the base of the bulb to a box, upon which an air god is kneeling. To a modern eye, the resemblance is uncanny. It looks exactly like an oversized light bulb with the snake playing the part of the glowing filament. The interpretation is as radical as it is compelling. Could this be a literal illustration of electric lighting used by the ancient Egyptians? Proponents of this theory argue that such a technology would solve one of Egyptology's most practical mysteries. How did artisans and painters illuminate the deep, windowless interiors of tombs and pyramids to execute their flawless artwork, far from any natural light source? The so-called Dendera Light offers a tantalizing answer. They suggest the Egyptians possessed a form of arc lighting, perhaps using primitive batteries like the one found in Baghdad, to power these bulbs and banish the darkness with an artificial sun. Mainstream Egyptology, however, provides a very different and deeply symbolic interpretation. They identify the scene as a representation of the creation myth centered on the god Harsumptus. In this view, the bulb is not a bulb at all, but the womb of the sky goddess Nut, depicted as a lotus flower. The snake is the deity being born from this cosmic womb, and the entire tableau symbolizes the moment of creation and the journey of the sun god through the underworld. This is a powerful and coherent mythological explanation. Yet, the visual similarity to a Crookes tube, an early experimental electrical tube that produces a glowing beam when voltage is applied, is difficult to ignore. The two interpretations are not necessarily mutually exclusive. Ancient cultures often encoded advanced knowledge within their religious iconography, using symbolic language to describe real phenomena. What if the Dendera relief is both myth and manual? What if the priests were depicting a profound spiritual concept using the most advanced technological analogy available to them, a tangible representation of divine, illuminating power? This single carved wall challenges us to look beyond our own assumptions. It asks whether we have been too quick to dismiss the technological symbolism embedded in sacred art, and whether the light of knowledge once burned brighter than we ever believed. The debate between ancient myth and lost technology is a quiet one, carved in stone, but another slab of rock unearthed in the American heartland ignites a far louder and more contentious battle. In 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Oman was clearing trees on his land near Kensington, Minnesota, when he discovered a large 200-pound slab of greywacke stone tangled in the roots of an aspen tree. The tree itself was estimated to be at least 40 years old, suggesting the stone had been there for some time. Carved into its flat face was an inscription, a message in runic characters that, when translated, told a harrowing story. It spoke of a party of 8 Goths or Swedes and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland far to the west. The inscription was dated, clearly and shockingly, to the year 1362. It described a tragic outcome with 10 men red with blood and dead, and ended with a plea to the Virgin Mary to save them from evil. This was the Kensington Runestone, and its implications were explosive. If authentic, it was not merely proof of Viking contact like the Maine Penny, but a dated record of a substantial inland expedition, a full 130 years before Columbus set sail. The official history of European discovery in America would be completely overturned, suggesting a continuous, documented Norse presence in the continent's interior for over a century. The stone was immediately declared a hoax by academics. They argued the runes were a clumsy mix of styles and that the language contained modern Scandinavian elements, the work of a homesick farmer carving a prank. For decades, the runestone was dismissed as a forgery, a curiosity for local museums. Yet, the stone refused to be so easily silenced. Later, more nuanced linguistic analyses revealed that the runes and the language were not so easily dismissed. Some scholars found that the specific runic forms and grammatical constructions could, in fact, be consistent with a 14th century Scandinavian origin, potentially reflecting an isolated dialect. The geological evidence added another layer of intrigue. Geologists who examined the stone noted the deep, weathered patina within the carved runes, a kind of mineral varnish that takes centuries to form naturally. This patina seemed to match the exposed surface of the stone, suggesting the carving was as old as the inscription claimed. The debate is a perfect stalemate. For every point, there is a counterpoint. Skeptics argue the weathering could be faked or that the tree roots could have shifted a more recently carved stone. Believers point to the sheer unlikelihood of a simple farmer in 19th century Minnesota possessing the obscure linguistic knowledge to create such a complex and debated inscription. The Kensington Runestone is more than just a rock. It is a Rorschach test for how we view history. Do we trust only the documents that have survived in European archives, or do we allow for the possibility that history was also written on stone in the Minnesota soil by men who never made it home to tell their tale? It represents the ghosts of voyages that official history never recorded, a whispered story of exploration and tragedy that challenges us to question who really knew the shape of the world and when they knew it. Beneath the clear, blue currents off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island lies a site that seems to defy nature itself. A colossal, monolithic structure emerges from the seafloor, a sprawling complex of massive stone blocks descending into the deep. It is a landscape of impossible geometry, a place of wide, flat terraces, sharp, 90-degree angles, and towering pillars that look like they were placed by a giant's hand. The sheer walls are interrupted by what appear to be perfectly straight staircases, climbing up and down the submerged rock face. Most haunting of all are the features that resemble carved faces, their stoic expressions gazing out from the aquatic gloom. This is the Yonaguni Monument, and since its discovery in the 1980s, it has been at the center of a fierce debate. Is this a stunning example of natural geology, or the sunken ruins of a civilization lost to prehistory? Geologists point to the region's unique sandstone, which naturally fractures along straight plains due to seismic activity. They argue that the powerful currents and relentless erosion of the ocean could, over millennia, sculpt these seemingly perfect platforms and steps. Nature, they say, is a master architect capable of creating formations that fool the human eye into seeing design. Yet this explanation struggles to account for the sheer concentration of anomalous features in one place. How does nature carve two round holes, each over 6 feet across, side by side in a single stone terrace? How does it create a sharp, pentagonal-shaped enclosure or a wide archway that looks like a ceremonial gate? The symmetrical patterns and repetitive right angles seem to follow a logic that natural forces rarely produce with such consistency. If the Yonaguni Monument is indeed a work of human hands, its implications are staggering. For it to be above water and accessible to its builders, it must have been constructed during the last ice age, when global sea levels were nearly 400 feet lower. That places its creation at over 10,000 years ago, a time when mainstream history tells us humans were simple hunter-gatherers, just beginning to experiment with agriculture. They were not supposed to be capable of the quarrying, engineering, and monumental architecture required to shape a structure of this immense scale. This single underwater complex suggests the existence of a forgotten seafaring culture in the Pacific, a people with the knowledge and organization to alter their coastline in a profound and permanent way. Their entire world, their cities, and their history would have been gradually swallowed by the rising seas as the glaciers melted, leaving behind only this one enigmatic monument as a ghostly underwater sentinel. It stands as a silent stone question, challenging us to wonder what other chapters of the human story are still hidden beneath the waves, waiting for the tides of knowledge to recede. The deep silence of the Yonaguni Monument is broken only by the ocean's currents. but a different kind of record speaks of lights in the sky from a time long before flight was ever dreamed. Among the most controversial of all ancient texts is the Tulli Papyrus. Unlike a stone artifact, its evidence is purely textual, a story passed down through a fragile and disputed chain. The document is said to be a translation of an Egyptian papyrus from the reign of Pharaoh Thutmose III, around 1480 before the Common Era. According to the account, the scribes of the time witnessed a miraculous and terrifying event. They wrote of fiery circles appearing in the southern sky, shining brighter than the sun. These objects, they reported, maneuvered unpredictably before finally ascending higher and vanishing toward the south. The Egyptian army reportedly watched this spectacle until it was over, with the pharaoh himself later ordering the event to be recorded in his annals. If this account were true, it would be one of the most detailed records of an unidentified aerial phenomenon from the ancient world. The problem and the source of immense skepticism lies in the papyrus itself. The original has never been seen by modern Egyptologists. The entire story is based on a copy of a transcription that an Italian diplomat claimed to have seen in Cairo in the 1930s. He said he transcribed the hieratic text, a cursive form of hieroglyphs, into hieroglyphs himself and then translated it. This means we are not looking at a photograph or a physical scan of an ancient document, but at a modern rendering of a translation of a transcription. It is a story of a story, with the original source completely absent. This shaky provenance leads most academics to dismiss the Tulli Papyrus entirely as a hoax or a misunderstanding. Yet its persistence in popular culture points to a deeper question that goes beyond its authenticity. How would an ancient civilization with a worldview rooted in gods and omens record something truly inexplicable in their sky? Would they describe advanced technology in the only language they had, using terms like circles of fire and shining discs? The Tulli Papyrus, whether a genuine historical record or a compelling modern myth, forces us to consider that the human experience of the unknown is not a new phenomenon. It suggests that the sky has always held its secrets, and that our ancestors were just as compelled as we are to look up and document the things they could not understand. High above the desert sands, within the sacred temple of Seti I at Abydos, a single panel of hieroglyphs has ignited a firestorm of debate. The carving seems to show, with startling clarity, the silhouettes of a helicopter, a submarine, and some kind of futuristic aircraft or glider. The shapes are undeniably there, their outlines crisp and unmistakable to a modern eye. How could such imagery exist in a temple built over 3,000 years ago? The official explanation from Egyptology is one of practical archaeology, not lost technology. This phenomenon is known as a palimpsest. Think of a stone wall as an ancient chalkboard. A pharaoh would have his name and deeds carved deeply into the stone. A successor, perhaps seeking to legitimize his own rule, might later have that carving partially chiseled away and his own name and titles inscribed over the top. Over centuries, the plaster used to smooth these alterations can fall away and erosion can wear down the stone. What remains is a composite image, a chance overlapping of two or more separate sets of hieroglyphs from different time periods. The famous helicopter, in this view, is not a single object but the accidental fusion of parts of several different symbols. The rotor might be the eroded remains of a royal cartouche, while the body could be a combination of other signs. It is a trick of time and politics, not a blueprint for ancient aviation. Yet, even with this rational explanation, the coincidence feels almost too perfect. The resemblance is so precise that it continues to captivate the imagination. Could this be an example of symbolic prophecy, where the priests encoded a vision of the future into their sacred art? Or does it suggest a far more radical idea that the forms of modern machinery are not new inventions, but rediscoveries of a timeless archetypal language? This single carved wall forces us to confront the limits of our interpretation. We see the past through the lens of our own time, and sometimes in the fractured stone, we see a reflection of ourselves staring back. The Abydos helicopter may be the ultimate Rorschach test, a blank slate upon which we project our deepest questions about time, knowledge, and the possibility that our civilization is not the first to look to the skies. Buried within a lump of coal from a mine in Wolfsegg, Austria, was a small, heavy cube of iron. Discovered in 1885, this object, often called the Wolfsegg iron or the Salzburg cube, was found embedded in a coal seam dating to the Tertiary period, a layer of earth that is millions of years old. To the miners who found it, the cube was a bizarre anomaly, an object of perfect geometric shape imprisoned within a substance formed from prehistoric plant matter long before the first humans walked the earth. The cube itself is relatively small, measuring roughly 2 inches per side, with a deep groove carved around its center and a color ranging from a deep gray to a dull black. Its edges are sharp and its faces are mostly flat, giving it an undeniably manufactured appearance. How could such a clearly shaped object find itself locked inside coal that predates humanity by eons? The immediate and most logical scientific explanation points to the skies. It could be a meteorite, a piece of nickel iron from the asteroid belt that fell to Earth and was somehow incorporated into the forming coal bed. Meteoric iron can sometimes form geometric shapes due to its crystalline structure, and the groove could be a natural fracture. Yet this explanation is not entirely satisfying. Early analyses of the cube suggested it was made of cast iron, a manufactured alloy, and its specific shape seems a little too perfect, a little too symmetrical, to be a random product of nature. If it is not a meteorite, then the implications are staggering. It would mean that an intelligent, tool-using civilization existed on this planet during an age we have always believed was dominated by primordial mammals. This is not just an out-of-place artifact, it is an out-of-time artifact, a wrench thrown directly into the gears of our evolutionary timeline. The Wolfsegg iron presents us with a stark and simple choice. Either our understanding of geology and the deep past is fundamentally incomplete, or we must accept the possibility that another intelligence, entirely separate from our own lineage, once walked the Earth, leaving behind only this small, enigmatic metal cube as proof of its passage. Far from any known civilization, on the edge of the Kadam Basin in China, a solitary, pyramid-shaped mountain stands against a stark and desolate landscape. Nestled within its rocky face is a system of ancient, rust-colored pipes, emerging from the stone and snaking their way down to the brackish waters of Tossan Lake. These are the Baigong Pipes, a perplexing network of tubular structures made of iron, with diameters ranging from the width of a toothpick to over 1.5 feet across. They are not scattered randomly but appear to follow a deliberate, organized pattern, some running horizontally into the mountain, others descending vertically from its peak, all converging toward the saltwater lake as if part of a grand, forgotten plumbing system. The location itself adds to the mystery. This is Mount Baigong, a place so remote and inhospitable that it has never supported a permanent human settlement. There are no ruins of a city, no pottery shards, no signs of any culture that would have had the need or the capability for such an ambitious industrial project. So who built this and for what possible purpose? Could it have been a sophisticated irrigation system for a long-vanished community, or perhaps a mechanism for drawing saline water for some unknown industrial process? The most baffling aspect is their age. When samples were sent for analysis, the results were staggering. Some dating attempts suggested the pipes could be up to 150,000 years old, a time when, according to mainstream science, Homo sapiens were just beginning their migration out of Africa. Such a date is so profoundly disruptive that it is heavily disputed, with many scientists arguing the results must be flawed. The official, mainstream explanation is that these are not pipes at all, but the fossilized remains of ancient tree roots. In a natural process called rhizocretion, minerals can precipitate around roots, eventually forming hollow, pipe-like casts of sandstone and iron oxide after the organic material decays. This is a known geological phenomenon, yet the Baigong Pipes challenge this tidy explanation. Skeptics of the tree root theory point to the metallic composition of the pipes, which laboratory tests showed contains a significant percentage of iron oxide alongside silicon dioxide and calcium oxide. More compelling is their structured arrangement. Fossilized roots typically form a tangled, organic web, not a coordinated network of straight lines and right angles leading directly to a water source. The pipes seem to tell a story of design, not a random act of geology. They stand as rusted, silent conduits in a place where no one should have been able to build, pushing us to consider a narrative where an unknown, advanced culture once operated on the Tibetan plateau, leaving behind only these corroded fragments of their industry as a cryptic clue to their existence. The Georgia Guidestones rose from a rural field not in antiquity, but in our own recent past. Erected in 1980 in Elbert County, Georgia, this massive granite monument was commissioned by a man or group operating under the pseudonym R.C. Christian, an identity that remains completely anonymous to this day. Its creators left no manifesto, no organization to claim it, only the stones themselves bearing a message for humanity. On its 4 towering slabs, 10 guiding principles were inscribed in 8 of the world's modern languages, a blueprint for an age of reason. The directives called for maintaining the human population below 500 million, guiding reproduction wisely, unifying humanity with a new global language, and ruling passion and faith with tempered reason. It was a vision for a future built on logic and sustainability. Yet its anonymous origin and stark prescriptions made it a magnet for intense speculation and conspiracy theories. For decades, it stood as a modern monolith, a deliberate echo of ancient standing stones, challenging passers-by with its cold, rationalist creed. Then, in 2022, the mystery turned to violence. An unknown assailant detonated an explosive device, severely damaging the structure, leading authorities to dismantle the remainder for safety. The bombing did not resolve the enigma, it only deepened it. The Guidestones serve as a powerful, contemporary reminder that the impulse to create cryptic monuments intended to convey profound knowledge is not confined to the distant past. Here was an artifact whose creators we could, in theory, have questioned, yet their identity and true intentions were deliberately hidden, leaving their granite message to be interpreted by a world they would never see. It proves that the line between a profound guide for future generations and an inscrutable relic is often drawn not by time, but by the secretive hand of its maker. Carved into the soft sandstone walls of a secluded Australian valley are markings that seem to have been teleported from another continent. Known as the Gosford Glyphs, this collection of nearly 300 carvings depicts scenes and symbols that look unmistakably Egyptian. There are figures of gods like Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the dead, and royal cartouches that appear to enclose the names of known pharaohs. For those who first encountered them, the implication was staggering. Could this be hard evidence that ancient Egyptian sailors, masters of the Mediterranean, had somehow crossed thousands of miles of open ocean to reach the land down under? The sheer romance of the idea is compelling, suggesting a prehistoric age of global exploration that rewrites the history of human migration. Mainstream archaeology, however, responds with a resounding and skeptical no. Experts in Egyptology have thoroughly examined the glyphs and point to numerous glaring problems. The hieroglyphs are a chaotic mix of styles from different Egyptian time periods, jumbled together in a way no ancient scribe would ever do. More damning are the specific errors, the equivalent of modern spelling mistakes and grammatical blunders that would be unthinkable for a literate Egyptian. The carvings are also surprisingly shallow and fresh, lacking the deep, weathered patina one would expect from an artifact that has endured for millennia in the harsh Australian elements. The most widely accepted explanation is that they are a hoax, likely created in the 20th century by returning Australian soldiers who had been stationed in Egypt during the World Wars, armed with a tourist's understanding of the ancient script. Yet, even with this overwhelming evidence, a small group of researchers continues to argue for their authenticity. They point to a handful of symbols that they claim are carved with correct, period-specific techniques, and they suggest that some of the so-called errors could be the result of a degraded script carved by homesick explorers far from their homeland. This persistent debate makes the Gosford Glyphs a perfect case study in the world of anomalous artifacts. They sit at the intersection of hard evidence and human longing, forcing us to confront a difficult question. How much of what we want to believe about the past is shaped by the artifacts we find, and how much is shaped by the stories we are desperate to tell? They remind us that the line between a world-altering discovery and an elaborate forgery can be frustratingly thin, and that our desire to connect the dots across ancient cultures can sometimes draw lines that were never really there. These scattered artifacts are not random anomalies. Viewed together, they form a constellation of clues, each one a point of light in a forgotten map of human history. The same sophisticated knowledge of the stars appears in the geared astronomy of the Antikythera Mechanism and the celestial alignments of the Great Pyramid. The same impossible engineering echoes in the multi-ton granite spheres of Costa Rica and the colossal, walking Moai of Easter Island, and the same evidence of global voyaging is whispered by the Norse coin in Maine and the potential Egyptian glyphs in Australia. These are not isolated achievements. They form a pattern, a repeated signature of advanced understanding that appears across continents and millennia. This pattern suggests that ancient cultures did not develop in complete isolation. They may have been connected by trade routes we have yet to map, or perhaps they were the scattered inheritors of a much older, foundational civilization whose own history was erased by a global cataclysm, like the rising seas that swallowed Yonaguni. The most compelling theme is the seamless fusion of science and spirit. The Great Pyramid was both a tomb and a cosmic calculator. The Nazca Lines were both ritual pathways and celestial diagrams. This was not a world where faith and reason were in conflict. Instead, knowledge was a unified whole, where understanding the movement of a planet was as sacred as understanding the journey of a soul. This interconnected world challenges the very core of our historical narrative. We are taught a story of isolated cultures slowly climbing the ladder of progress, each inventing the wheel or writing independently. But what if that ladder is an illusion? What if instead humanity's journey has been a cycle of discovery, loss, and rediscovery? These 25 artifacts are the surviving fragments from a previous peak in that cycle, hinting at a time when the world was far more connected, and humanity's grasp of its place in the cosmos was far more profound than we have ever dared to believe. Our journey through these 25 artifacts reveals a history far more mysterious and complex than any textbook describes. From ancient computers to potential electric batteries, these objects are not merely curiosities. They are persistent clues, fragments of a story we are only just beginning to piece together. They suggest our ancestors may have possessed profound knowledge, a sophisticated understanding of the world that was subsequently lost, forgotten, or perhaps even suppressed over the long march of centuries. While a healthy skepticism is essential in separating fact from fantasy, the cumulative weight of these anomalies is simply too significant to ignore. Each one on its own might be dismissed as a fluke or a misunderstanding, but when you line them all up, they form a compelling pattern that our established timeline cannot easily contain. They are an open invitation to keep questioning, to keep exploring, and to dig deeper, both literally in the earth and figuratively in the archives of human knowledge. The true story of humanity's past is still being written, and the most profound chapters may still be buried, waiting for the right moment to be unearthed. We want to hear from you. Which of these 25 artifacts did you find the most compelling? Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe for more journeys into the unknown.